Hello, beautiful souls. I'm here today to talk about something a little different. Actually, it's something that I've resisted. It's been coming to me quite a while now from the guides. And I've started hearing it from other channels, so I realize it's some important information that wants to come through. And so I'm going to be offering that today, so stay tuned and I will tell you what that is and how we can work with what the guides are talking about. So here's what's been coming through quite strongly, and the reason I've resisted sharing it is because we're already going through so much, and I often feel like people are looking to be uplifted in these times, and this is about us taking responsibility. And what's been coming through clearly to me is that we have to take responsibility for our thoughts and also for our actions toward the earth and toward others, of course. But the big piece is about us being responsible for our thoughts. And what does that really mean? What they want us to know, the guides want us to know, is that we are creating with every thought. Every thought is a thing. And you can take this literally, like every thought we think is creating a bubble of existence somewhere. And the more we think about it, the more that bubble grows and grows and grows until it becomes actually something manifest upon this earth. So if we have fear and we keep focusing on fear, so for example, let's say we have fear of lack and we're always worried about where the money's going to come from, then things will happen in our lives to actually take money away from us. I've used an example before of a family member of mine saying she was going to stop even trying to save money because every time she got some money in the bank, the car would break down, the fridge would need to be replaced, something would happen that would take the money. And that comes from thoughts that you don't believe that you have money, or you're always thinking about there's not enough money. So then life has to show us not enough money because that's our belief system. And these belief systems are built from every thought we have. But the real message that the guides want us to understand is that literally every thought is a thing. And so we need to become very aware of every thought we're having because we can't change it until we're aware of it. So if we're daydreaming and creating something with our daydreams or focusing on the future or past and things that we're afraid of or things that happened in the past that were unpleasant, we're bringing that into our now awareness and we're perpetuating that experience for ourselves. And so in order for us to create a new earth where we're living a lifestyle that we would like to be living, where we're living in ease and grace and joy and love and acceptance and unity, we have to change the way we think. That's the only way we're going to recreate this world we're living in. And this is a responsibility that we have to take on that many people do not understand. Most people just do not understand the impact of every thought. I'd like to say that everything we see on the outside begins on the inside as a thought. And literally, science has proven that the brain is not where memory is stored. The brain is like a radar that goes out and picks up memory that is stored in the field. We have access to everything in this field, and we create in the field. And I see it as the pineal gland projecting out into the world, and then we perceive it with our physical eyes and see it as reality. But it begins within us in the pineal gland. And this is part of why it's important for us to make sure our pineal glands are cleared and not calcified so that we can generate a very clear picture of what we want to be creating. So this is kind of getting into the quantum physics a bit, but it's very simple just to know. And I invite you to check in with your own internal guidance to be another important piece that's coming through me is about us being autonomous, and I'll get to that either later in this video or another video. The important piece is to know that we are creating with everything we think. So we have to do our best not to let our thoughts be going into fear and projecting into the future. That's usually a formula for creating hardship. Unless we're seeing that our future is full of love and grace and ease and people supporting each other and everybody financially secure, we don't have to know how this is going to come about. I think this is where a lot of people get stuck, trying to think, well, how's that going to happen? Well, just think about it. Whoever dreamed that a little virus would come along and shut down the whole world? Whoever dreamed that would be possible? That just goes to show we don't have to know the how. This virus is serving us. This virus is giving us the time, for one thing, to go in and start recognizing what our beliefs are, what our thoughts are, what we're creating for our future with our thoughts that we're thinking right now, because that is the way it works. So this is an opportunity for us to go within, see where our fearful thoughts are stemming from, see why we keep repeating the same thoughts over and over, and to become aware of what our thoughts are. And then, this is a big piece that the guides are saying to me, even with sessions with people, I see the sessions changing, whereas in the past, I have the ability with the freedom release technique to go in and see where belief systems originated, perhaps it's past lifetimes, but now more and more the guides are giving responsibility back to my clients and saying it's your job to take the responsibility for what you're thinking. So for example, I have a client recently who has trouble with his knees. And the response that came through was, this is the way you're thinking, this is where your thoughts are, you need to take the responsibility to start turning these around. They gave him activities to do to help that happen, and part of that was to move into gratitude about the things that are challenging him in his life, to find gratitude for those things, because everything is a gift. This is another piece that a lot of people don't understand. Suffering comes from our interpretation of what's happening in our lives, not from the actual event. Suffering is interpreting it as wrong or bad or hard, but if we can look for the gift in it, because there's always a gift, suffering comes for personal growth. And once we get the growth that's wanting to happen from this event, we are no longer suffering from it, and we no longer have a need to create it in our lives. We create events to show us what's on the inside so that we can see it externally in our lives. And then it's an opportunity for us to say, okay, there's something in me that's creating this situation. I'm going to go in and look at what that is. I'm going to get real with myself. I'm going to be honest with the parts of myself that I don't want to look at, because this is the way we move back to sovereignty, back to becoming empowered beings, and it's only as empowered humans that we are going to shift and change the world into that which we want it to be. We have been spinning on a wheel where others really are deciding for us what life is like, and it's time for all of that to change. And so this piece about taking responsibility for our thoughts is the beginning of that changing. And part of what's coming up for me around this as well is a lot of thought about different events that are happening. So even the other day I heard something about it becoming a society full of robots, or an earth full of robots. And my response to that was, I'm not going to live in a world that's controlled by robots. I'm just not going to be there. And how do I do that? By not putting my focus there. The more of us who get caught up in these stories, and there are different viewpoints on this, and I really had to give some thought to this. I can only express my truth. So I want you to take this and discern whether it feels true for you or not. Because there are some people who believe we need to be aware of all the dark things that have been happening on the earth. And I agree that we are served to have awareness of how we've been held back, how we've been suppressed. And then we also, I believe, have to then decide that we are going to choose differently. We are going to choose a different life for ourselves. And so the way that happens is to, for one, know ourselves, look at the way we have been controlled, decide that we are going to be in charge of our own lives. And again, in order to do that, we have to know where our thoughts go, where we allow ourselves to roam and wander when we're daydreaming. We have to be aware of that so that we can shift it and change it. And to know that if I'm focusing on a world where everybody lives in harmony, where we have our freedom, we have our autonomy, where the control systems that have been working on the earth no longer have a foundation to work on, I feel that this is how we are going to bring the new earth into reality. We have to focus on what we're choosing to be living, not what we don't want to be living. Whenever we focus on what we don't want, we're not giving any kind of solution, any kind of new vision. We're just perpetuating what we don't want. The world needs a new vision, and it needs each one of us to envision the world that we're choosing to be living in. And so this is the responsibility that has been coming through for me very strong from the guides. And we do this again by whenever we catch ourselves having thoughts that hold fear, lack consciousness, worried about what's coming, thinking that things are going to fall apart. Whenever we have thoughts that are going there, we really need to go in and say, okay, what part of me feels hopeless or helpless in this situation? Where does that feeling of hopelessness or helplessness come from? Where do I feel like a victim? Do your internal work to go back and find the source of that so that you can be empowered to take charge of your own life. And in the process of that, even if you do spend some time with thoughts that are going to how we've been controlled and managed and thoughts about what this virus may be all about, also let yourself, every time your thoughts go to something that is negative, let yourself turn it around into the world you want to be living. This is our responsibility right now, is to create the world that we would like to be living in. The old world is falling apart. And each one of us as a collective are projecting the new earth that we're going to be living in. And I believe that each of us individually are living it's almost like each of us are living new earth or old earth, depending on where we allow our thoughts to go, which also affect our frequency. There are thoughts that hold a low frequency, thoughts that hold a high frequency. We know that. Hatred is a low frequency, love is a high frequency. There's music that holds a low frequency and creates disharmony, and there's music that creates a high frequency and brings us into coherence. So we need to become aware, we need to become conscious and take responsibility for our thoughts. Our actions stem from our thoughts. It all begins with our thoughts, with our beliefs. So every thought creates a belief. So I'll give an example. I'm originally from Nova Scotia, and that the greatest mass shooting in Canada just happened in Nova Scotia on the weekend. And I was visiting my daughter on the weekend, and one of her dear friends was closely affected by this event. And I was talking to my mom and my sister, who are both in Nova Scotia, and my son is also there. And my mom said, you know, this person who did this dressed up like a police officer and then stopped people and was shooting them. And he had a police car, like it was very hard for anyone to know that he was not a police officer. And my mom said, when I'm driving down the road, if a police officer in a car wanted to pull me over, I would be afraid. And I recognize that this is something that could come from this event, that people will automatically be afraid. And my thought was, this was one person who obviously was very disturbed. And in these times that we're going through now that are so challenging, that anyone with any kind of mental imbalance or mental illness may be impacted much more than the rest of us. So this person was obviously disturbed, but it doesn't mean that the same thing is going to happen over and over. But this is what our minds want to do. And I've recognized this in myself. One negative event, like walking on a trail and coming to an area where there was lots of hornets. When I came back on that trail, I expected to see those hornets. Of course, that's natural. But do we let that come in and be a fear? The next time I'm on the trail, I expect to see the hornets. Next time I'm on the trail, I expect to see the hornets. Suddenly I have this great fear of that place on the trail. But what I recognized was that it can happen only one event, one time that happens. And the next time I'm in a similar event, my body expects that it has to be afraid. This is part of being aware of our thoughts. This is part of being totally conscious of where our beliefs and our thoughts go, and how thoughts perpetuate to become a belief system. We don't have to allow that to happen. We don't have to believe it. It's natural that it happens, but part of becoming a self-master of our own way of being is recognizing this and choosing differently. Choosing to know that I can decide that this area is free and that was just a one-time event, and the rest of the time when I walk through here there's not going to be any hornets whatsoever. This is just a very small example of how this can work. And so we get to decide our reality regardless of what's happening on the outside. And again, everything that happens to us is an opportunity. And the more we can look for the opportunity, the more we're going to be living in peace, because looking for it is going to bring the awareness to us. If we're looking for something, intentionally wanting to discover something, the universe will start showing it to us in a variety of ways. So where we put our focus is what we are going to create. So please take this opportunity to just look in, feel if this message really resonates as truth for you, and if it does, become aware and become responsible for our thoughts. Let's envision a world where we are all coming together, where we are supported by our governments, by all the systems that are falling apart now, our education systems, our governments, things like the World Health Organization, United Nations. Things are starting to fall. And the reason they're falling is because they were built on an energy of a denser reality that is no longer the truth of our earth experience. And everything that is falling will show you how dense they are. If it's falling, it's showing you that it created a greater density than the 5D world that we're all moving into. And so we can let it go. And whatever is falling apart in our own lives is creating a greater density that no longer serves us. Whoever is falling out of our lives as far as friends and relationships or co-workers, everything that's falling away is because it's creating a denser vibration that no longer serves us. And people can become afraid of letting things go, I believe, because they don't allow themselves to go into the future and realize, well, the reason this is falling away is because something more beautiful wants to come in instead. Something more kind and generous and supportive and more unity focused wants to come into reality in its place. But if we're still trying to hold on to all the things that are falling away and hold them up and keep them alive, we're not allowing this new experience that this is all about to come into our reality. And this is not to say it will be easy, because our economy needs to fall. It's based on a system that is certainly not for everyone. It's for a very small minority of people, and everyone else pretty much is enslaved under that system. It's time for us to move from slavery to sovereignty and to be free. And so let these old systems that are falling away, let them go, and instead put your energy into envisioning the world that you would like to see come in its place. Governments that really care about the people. People who are in governance, who are not doing it for the money and for the pension. They're doing it because they really have a vision for what they believe would be supportive to everyone in their communities, and the people support them because they know they hold that vision. And envision a government where the people who are voted in really are voted in by the numbers that are voted, and that the big corporations aren't able to manipulate our governments any longer, that people have the freedom for what they choose for medical assistance, and that people receive medical care at like in Canada, where it's part of our taxes and we have free medical care, that people don't have to go broke or go without or be sick or die because they can't get the medical care they need. All of these systems have not been serving the all. And we are moving into a time where it's recognizing that we are all here together. What happens to one person happens to me as well, because we are one unit with many different aspects creating that. So we can do this, we can create this. And I was going to share some stories even about our health and how much, just as a way to show how much our thoughts actually impact our reality. Because I've always had this knowing that my health is connected to my emotional state of being. And years ago, I developed high blood pressure. I was feeling like something was wrong, and I went to the doctor, and sure enough, I had high blood pressure. I think I was around 50 at the time. And the doctor also happened to be my mom's doctor, and she knew that my mom was on high blood pressure medication. And she said, find out what medication your mother is taking, because the same would probably work for you. And I left her office thinking, there is no way I am going on high blood pressure medication for the rest of my life. And I looked at what it could be emotionally. I just thought, okay, high blood pressure. Okay, this is heart. You know, what could this be related to in the heart? And I realized what that was connected to, what I had been thinking, and realized that, you know, even though I was thinking that way, it didn't need to be my truth. And 3 weeks later, I went back and my blood pressure was normal. And when I was there that time, she said, this is serious. You can't ignore this, because she knew that I'm into more alternative ways of healing. And when I went back 3 weeks later, it was normal, and I've never had high blood pressure again. I had a spot on my shoulder that was there for a couple of years, and it kept changing, and I kept looking in to see what it might be related to. And finally, after a couple of years, a friend of mine said, look, you have to go to the doctor. And he tested it, and sure enough, he did a biopsy, and sure enough, it came back as being the form of cancer that they could remove. And I had said to him, I knew it was healing. And I had said to him when I was first there, you know, this is healing. And of course, he just ignored me. So I thought, okay, I just have to give in. I just have to go with the system here. But after he did the biopsy, in the time leading up to that, I had gotten my blood work done. And I had a doctor of functional medicine, and she said my white blood count was down. And I recognized it was probably down because my body was trying to manage whatever this was. And when I found out it was cancer, I made that connection. That's why my white blood count was low. She had me taking two different things. I won't say it because I would want everyone to make sure that they're receiving the proper care from a doctor for whatever's going on with them, but two supplements. And I believe that those supplements built up my white blood count to the point that after the biopsy, it completely healed. They scheduled me to have the rest of it removed. It completely healed. So this is not to say for you to not seek the medical care that you need and do that. It's just for us to know that our thoughts create our reality. Another example of this is people who have multiple personality disorders. They can have a diagnosed illness as one personality and not have it in another personality. How does that happen? Instantaneously, that your body shifts from having one thing to the next minute it doesn't have it. It's more than just being in the physical. And of course, the placebo effect shows us this very clearly. And they've even shown that even when people know they're receiving a placebo, they still get better. So it's incredible, this power of the mind. That's why I'm sharing this, for you to know the power of the mind, and also to know that everything that we create in our reality is created internally, projected out, we bring it back in and see it as our reality. So I wanted to share this very clearly because it's been coming through for a while now from the guides of the importance for us to be responsible for our thoughts, because we're right now at the point where, with the old world crumbling, we are now literally building the foundation, and we are building that, each one of us, with our thoughts and where we put our focus. That's why this is so important right now. That's why now is the time for us to be aware of this and to be choosing very wisely and very consciously what our thoughts are. And again, just catch them and just turn it around. Write a list of all the things that you would like to see in the new world, in the new earth. A friend of mine did a vision board with her kids of the new earth. I thought it was brilliant because it's right there. This is what I want my new world to look like, and the new world for the rest of humanity. What does that mean with healthcare, with our governments, with our freedom, with where we can live, with affordability for living, with ease of creating income, with supporting one another, with accepting diversity? A channel came through the other day. Oh, it was one of my love notes. And they said diversity is diversity of thought. For us to even honor diversity of thought, everybody doesn't need to think the way we do. Nobody does. To accept diversity and accept and respect people for where they are on this journey. I find with COVID-19, there are people making jokes of maybe others who might feel like they need to wear a mask or need to wear gloves or have fear. Well, let's just honor that for them. That's where they are. They don't have to think the way we do in this. Or maybe you're someone who does wear a mask and you judge people who don't. I can understand that even more, actually, if you feel that you need to be protected in that way and you feel fear around others who aren't. But let's be accepting of one another and realize that we all think differently. And it's the diversity of that thought that could create a beautiful world. So, my friends, as I said, this is a little bit different than what I usually bring through. It's about a channeling instead of actually doing channeling on the spot. And as I said as well, another message about sovereignty and claiming our sovereignty is also wanting to come through. So I'll save that for another time. And sending so much love to you, so much grace. And again, please check and just check in with yourself and be discerning about what you hear and make sure it resonates as your own truth. That's the first step in being sovereign and coming back to trusting ourselves instead of putting our trust outside or looking outside of ourselves for answers. The more we come to look inside, the more we'll come to know ourselves in that way and be able to trust our inner knowing. So sending you so much love. I will see you again soon. Be well.